Book Worms Horror Podcast is sponsored by Creepy Crate. Creepy Crate is a horror and true crime subscription box filled with spooky collectibles, macabre accessories, and terrifying goodies. Each bi-monthly box is filled with over $85 of terror and includes at least one horror or true crime book. This box delivers dread to your doorstep for just $39.99 with free shipping. Go to creepycrate.store to subscribe. Use the code BOOKWORM5 at checkout to get $5 off your subscription. That's BOOKWORM5 for $5 off your subscription. And now to the show. Welcome to Book Worms Horror, the podcast that offers you tips on writing, especially in the horror genre. My name is James Ippoliti. I am the host of the Real Demons of Pop Culture podcast. This week's episode is all about Night of the Living Dead and zombies. If you haven't yet picked up Book Worms Horror Zine, you can get it in the Etsy link in the show notes. There are only a very little amount of issue 1, the premiere issue, left at a discount at $5 with free shipping. But issue 2 is still available, so go to the show notes, check it out. In this week's episode, Regina and I talk about making sacrifices to write and much more. Regina is a Waddy Award winner for Best Horror Novel, as well as multiple screenwriting awards, including a Webby honoree. Regina is also the contributing editor of the best-selling Local Haunts, a horror tube anthology. Find Regina and her alter ego, Batilda, at her booktube channel, Regina's Haunted Library, and on her blog, rstclair.com. Regina and myself are the editors of the Book Worms Horror Zine, and since we're seeking great horror fiction for bookworms, we created this weekly podcast to offer writers quick tips on writing for the genre. Find all our links in the show notes. Now let's jump into my conversation with Regina as she speaks with me from her haunted library. This week, we're going to talk about making sacrifices to write. So, Regina, what sacrifices have you made to put out your books?
Well, just this morning, I made the sacrifice of getting up really early. I think I woke up it was 4:44 a.m. Do you ever have those like triple number things? They're supposed to mean something.
No, but you know what scared me as a kid? And it's not, in hindsight, I'm not really frightened by that movie, but the Amityville Horror had the scene where he would wake up at 3:15 every morning?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because apparently that's when the murders happened or something. And if I ever woke up at 3:15 at night, I would be freaking terrified.
Interesting. And isn't that like one of your family names?
Yes, it is. DeFeo is my it's my grandmother's maiden name.
Any relation?
I have a feeling there is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I looked up some of it and they do trace back to similar areas. So
okay.
It's possible.
And,
I do see a family resemblance in Mr. DeFeo when in his mugshot.
Yeah, I see that too, the beard. Okay, but yeah, so sacrifices definitely. So when I woke at 4:44, I asked myself, do I want to go back to sleep or do I want to do some writing? And I did some writing. And I'm glad I did because it's done. Well, it's done at least for today. I'm working on I'm at the final chapter of my new book, and I want to rewrite the whole chapter. So it's kind of like at that hard labor stage, but I see the finish line, and that's fueling me.
Sleep is definitely a sacrifice, but I think here's the conundrum is that sleep is super, super important for everything.
That's true. Yeah.
Definitely for creativity, for mental well-being, all that. So I would advise, if you want to get up earlier, that's great, but get to sleep earlier.
Yeah, but I already went to bed at 9:00 last night. So
yeah, that's what I mean. For me, it's hard. I want to go to bed at 9, but then I have my son's up and I got to get him ready. And so there's so much stuff I got to do before bed. And so since I've been waking up earlier, it I have to go to sleep earlier or I'm just no good the next day.
Yeah. What about you? What are some of your...
I'll tell you what's a sacrifice for me is I sacrifice entertainment like TV,
Mm,
not books, not reading, but TV. I don't really play video games, but like I would say, like being on the phone, like doing, like I'm not up to speed with everyone because I realize if I need to do what I need to do, I have to not waste time on my phone or on Netflix or anything like that.
yes, I find that I just removed a bunch of apps like that off my phone because I joined TikTok just because my friend Righteous said he had a viral video, so I wanted to check it out. And
Yeah.
I found myself sitting on the couch a couple weeks ago, and I didn't move for like an hour watching the most stupid stuff that came up, and I realized what a black hole that is.
Yeah.
And I also removed Facebook, and I don't have Twitter. The only thing I have on my phone is Instagram because I do put stuff on there and keep up, but I'm not. I find less and less I want to be online like that, like on my more like my phone, and so that is a willing sacrifice. But yeah, I can see where it can drain your time, and you're also active on TikTok, so that's a whole different thing.
Right. I was going to say that some of us, and I think this is the hardest part for writers, is that it is this sort of sport where you're playing your own game here, you
Hmm.
know, and you're writing and all this. But then you have, unless you are lucky enough to have a team behind you, you're also doing the marketing
Yep.
and promotion, all that stuff, which includes getting on social media. And like we talked about before on the show, that's okay if it's part of the job. Just schedule
Yeah.
that this is when I'm going to promote it and then get off.
Yeah. No, that you have to. And I know like book talk is so big, and I've thought, oh, I should be doing this because it but then I'm like, no, you have to draw a line somewhere. Like I know what my limits are, and it can only do a little bit. Like just doing a YouTube video once a week is a lot for me to pull off.
It's time consuming. I've been
Yeah.
trying to get something YouTube going and I just am trying to figure that out. And I still haven't figured it out. Like I can do shorts because that's the
Hmm.
kind of time I have.
Yeah.
But long ones, it's pointless to put up a long, crappy video. Like if I'm putting up a long video, I need it to be really good.
Yeah. Yeah, like last night I started thinking about, oh, I want to do these like a YouTube series of like different horror theme, like movie themes, like Hollywood horror. I had all these ideas and I started writing it down, and then I thought, okay, but then I'm supposed to be doing all this other stuff with my, getting ready to promote my new book. And, it's just sort of you have to decide, prioritize, I guess, what's important. But I think if you're a writer or you aspire to be a writer, then that always has to be the first priority.
Yep. So for my first priority, it's the podcast, The Real Demons of Pop
Hmm.
Culture. And so when I post something on TikTok or Instagram, it's always pointing to that podcast.
Yeah, well, there you
Or
go.
it's
Hmm.
somehow related. So like that's how I keep it straight. Now I do take weird turns that I'm like, all right, I got to get back on the road.
Yeah,
I notice it quickly now, like where I'm like starting promoting something or even that stuff where I was being very positive. I'm like, well, that's turning me away. Like I'm just going to stick with Real Demons. And if I have something positive to say, I'll say it within that context
yeah, that makes sense.
instead of inventing a whole new website, or something like
I
that.
know there is that. What do they call it? The shiny object syndrome.
Yes.
I definitely have that.
Suffer from that.
We all do, I think.
And with that in mind, I can create something, but it has to have that. That's like if you're writing your book and you want to promote, like if you want to be on YouTube or come up with a series, come up with something that points them to your craft.
Right, right. So I was thinking instead, since my book has like a carnival theme, I thought I should start with the carnival theme horror to coincide with my book release, and then I'll get to Hollywood horror eventually. Because I think it's a good idea for a series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Different genres of horror. Like, I mean, I wrote a bunch down now. I can't remember them all, but I came up with some, like very specific types. And, there aren't a lot of horror movies about Hollywood,
No.
but it's a good subgenre. There's a lot of
It is.
noir, but not exactly horror.
Yeah, the things that come to mind when I think about Hollywood and horror is always true crime, like the Black Dahlia or something, but
Yes.
not necessarily a horror in Hollywood.
Hmm.
Like, you're right, that's something that's not uh hasn't been tapped enough as far as I can tell.
No.
Now, sacrifice, it depends on what your goal is, because hanging out with humans
Mm.
gets sacrificed as a creator. You know, you do have to say, well, do I want to go out tonight to the party or to the club or whatever it is, depending on your age, you
Yeah.
know? Because when I was younger, I should have sacrificed a lot more, and I
But
didn't.
think
I
of
was
all the
just
fun you
always,
missed.
yeah, I would have missed some fun. But then again, that's where we have to, you are missing out on stuff when you sacrifice.
Yes.
That's the point of calling it a sacrifice. If it was something that wasn't fun or interesting, it wouldn't be a sacrifice.
But I would also say that in order to be a good writer or a good artist of any kind, you need life experience.
Yes.
So you have to balance. Like this past weekend, Labor Day weekend, I had plans. I was going to, write and finish this book because it's really been hanging over my head. And then Joe, my husband, was like, "Oh, I want to go to the Delaware Bluegrass Festival," which is not like he's much more into that kind of music than I am. And I was like, "Oh, no," because he wanted to go 2 days. I'm like, I don't know, that's a lot. And you know what? I did it, and I had a great time, and it actually kind of cleared the deck for me now to like work on my book, if that makes sense. Like it actually was good to get away and to shake up the brain cells a little bit. So it is about balance, because you would be kind of a miserable person if you never got out and did anything. you know.
Yeah, well, the next couple of weeks are going to be about this, and we're
Mhm.
going to be having more conversations regarding this. How do we uh, sacrifice, but then also what do we do when we're not sacrificing? Like how do we enjoy ourselves? And we'll get into that in the next episode. You need to have that balance where I can go out and experience something. Now, there's a great quote from, I remember, Oliver Stone. And, I'm not a big fan of his, as I might have been in the past.
Mm.
I don't know. I feel like he's a little pretentious at this point.
Yeah, but he did make some great movies.
He did, but I think recently,
Yeah, I don't know if
I
I've
don't
seen
know.
any of his.
I don't know. But he was, talking to a bunch of film students, and the one person was like, "What's your advice? We're leaving school. And what do you have advice for us?" And he's like, "Get a life."
Yeah.
And in his eyes, he was in Vietnam before he ever went and made films. He
Mhm.
had all these life experiences to pull from. And that's what we're talking about. Like, if you're not going out and experiencing anything, you're going to have a hard time, especially if it's horror, because
Yeah.
horror requires you to understand, like, what are those scary things out in the world.
Yeah, and I also think horror, more than a lot of other genres, requires the writer to really plumb the depths of their emotions and human emotions in general, the running the whole gamut. And without life experience, unless you're a very unusual person, it's really hard to do that. Like if you've never really experienced the chaos of a breakup, or this kind of stuff where you've had like an intense emotional experience or intense fear. And I'm not saying you should seek out like bad situations, but if you've never really done that, like just like when I moved to New York City when I was 20, that was so informative because New York in the 80s was a scary place, a lot scarier than it is now. And I also being, fresh off the farm, so to speak, I had a lot to learn about different types of people and all that. And that was an incredible education. So I think anything you can do to have like you said, you don't have to be in a war, but just
Right. Let's hope not.
let's hope not. But like traveling. And it's great. It's great to do that it's great to do it at any age, but when like looking back on my life, that's one thing I do regret is I didn't have more experiences like that when I was young and have more fun and not be always worried about what's my career going to, like, what am I going to do?
And it's even really small things. So next week's Real Demons episode is all about gremlins. I didn't know this, but the writer, Chris Columbus, was living probably up there with you in New York. He was in Manhattan. He had this little loft apartment, and he would sleep and his arms be hanging off the bed. and there were mice in this
Ooh.
apartment. Right. And he would like wake up when they would brush past his hand.
Oh God.
And
that's like that's really horrifying. I hate rodents.
Right. And so he wakes up and he's like, what a terrifying things, these little creatures running around. And that's where Gremlins came from.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. I think that it always comes out of like real experiences like that, because we find out what we're afraid of.
Yeah. And American Werewolf in London, which was did werewolves a few weeks back. It was John Landis working on a film in, I don't know, let's say Romania or somewhere around there, where as they were on the set, they were moving, I guess, to a different area, and they passed these people who were performing like some kind of weird ritual on a dead body.
Ew.
And it was this idea that sparked the idea of a werewolf.
Like there was a real dead body?
Yeah, it was there was, I guess, a funeral type thing, but they were performing some kind of, I don't know. To him, it was a bizarre thing enough. And these are just very, very small events, but they triggered, the idea.
Yeah, I mean, like when I lived in New York, I hated riding the subway, and I still hate it. I'm very claustrophobic. When I read these stories in the Daily Mail about people like pushing someone in front of the tracks, like that is my worst nightmare. So like the story and the film, The Midnight Meat Train, that really gets me, because I've always been so terrified of subways and trains in general. Like I like riding trains, but like train tracks and things like that. It is like a death symbol in dream psychology, apparently.
We can end this by just saying sacrifices are about you taking time away from things you really enjoy to do what you really want to do, but with a balance. So we're not telling you to go out and experiencing every horror in the world.
No, not at all.
And not
always
writing.
Be safe.
Yes, but you need to be out there, but you also need to write. So you got to find that balance.
Also, you can experience something really intense anywhere, really.
Yeah.
If your eyes are open, you don't have to be in an exotic location. You can find it in your own neighborhood, at the mall, if you're really observant.
Well, somebody just posted a like really zoomed in photo of an ant. And it was really frightening. And I immediately thought they need to remake that movie Them.
Oh, right.
With this look, because it was scary. But even that can like looking at things that are usually tiny and blowing them up and then thinking of maybe a story with that.
Right, because you blow up some of those insects, they look like the alien.
Oh my God, yeah, they're horrifying.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back next week, and next week we're going to talk about enjoying your time when you're not writing, which we'll talk about your Bluegrass Festival.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for tuning in to the Book Worms Horror Podcast. All our links are in the show notes. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Book Worms is a Guerrilladelphia production.